Peace. Welcome to DSW Speaks, a space where clinical theory and practice collide. I'm Dr. Kirk J. James, and this podcast is an extension of our shared commitment to anti-oppressive social work, grounded praxis, and collective liberation. As our first guest on DSW Speaks, introduce yourself.
Peace, family. I'm Dr. Joe, Dr. Joseph Devon Williams. Got to give credit to the full name, but I go by Dr. Joe.
Thank you, sir. What inspired you to pursue your DSW?
What inspired me to pursue my doctorate, my DSW, my doctorate in social work, was I couldn't leave a belt on the table. What I mean by that is, if I think of a boxer having a belt in every weight class, I couldn't leave a weight class on the table. It seemed egotistical, but that was the first drive initially. The second drive was actually to be an authority in this field of clinical social work and working with my community on healing from trauma. That was like the true drive to pursue a doctorate in social work.
Tell us a little bit about your focus. You talked about trauma a little bit, but tell us a little bit about your focus of scholarship and how you got to that place.
My focus of scholarship was this idea of increasing access to more clinicians with lived experience of crime and mass incarceration. What I realized for myself when I came home for parole, my parole stipulations did not entail me being connected with a therapist. Yet as a social worker, I was encouraged to be connected to a therapist based on the work that we do. And it dawned on me, there is a need for more clinicians in my communities who have similar lived experience. And so my scholarship, one, was to research what exists in the literature regarding this topic, and two, to highlight what are the effects, the input for impact of adding more credible clinicians in social work and just to communities of color.
So you skipped a big part of your research and your scholarship, right? So you immediately went to when you came home for parole.
Okay.
So I want to go back a little bit.
Okay.
Like, tell us on a personal level, like, I know your story, right? So I want to make sure that people understand your story. The idea of credible clinicians came from your direct experience with the carceral system and the traumatic impact. So for people that don't understand those things, could you maybe just speak a little bit to that, and like, what does a broad scale impact look like?
Yes. Experiencing trauma as a kid, that led me to living a life of crime. Never coming in contact with a psychiatrist or a therapist or a social worker that I felt could get me. Finding myself in prison for the first time and coming home and experiencing just violence and death and just more trauma, and then being back in prison and wanting to figure out what was needed to help me heal. And as I pursued higher education the first go round, I realized that there was a need for therapy. There was a need for healing. There was a need for healing from the trauma. I didn't know social work would be it prior to coming home from Bard College, but this desire to help heal, this desire to help stop the youth from going to prison. That was like the first drive that led me to even think about social work.
Yeah, I love it. So you talk about healing, right? And I'm going to bring back again. So your work is around talk about a little bit about your capstone work, which I think is really, again, so kind of like, we talk about gaps. Your work really like touches on a big gap in the field, and you're kind of touching around that, but like, speak a little bit about, the lack of, clinicians that are actually able to understand and support people that are impacted by the carceral system. and how that then pushed you to really, become Dr. Joe.
When I was first studying for the NASW Code of Ethics, like I stumbled upon the code, our ethical standards. And under the ethical standards, there are some responsibilities. And one of those is for research and teaching. And as I got into the field, I realized there wasn't literature that can help clinicians work with hard to reach populations. There weren't scholarly articles from clinicians who said, from my experience as a formerly incarcerated clinician, this is how I engage, these are the methods that work. And when I did the research to look up a systematic search, out of over 15,000 articles about clinicians with lived experience, less than a handful had anything to do with clinicians with direct lived experience of crime and mass incarceration. So that gap, the formerly incarcerated, the young who are out of touch, they're considered hard to reach as a population. So who are the clinicians that are equipped to reach this hard to reach portion of the population?
Yeah. And this is so important, right? And I'm always pushing you to kind of like, you speak this language and you think everyone else understands this, but, to give this context, right? Like there are more people incarcerated in the U.S. than any other country, right? Probably in the history of the world. We have the, highest rates of incarceration, more children are incarcerated, more fathers, more mothers are incarcerated. So the idea of like a credible clinician, right? Like what you're saying, someone who has lived experience, but then is also trained with the tools, right? Is like it feels like a very important thing if we are going to be of service to the millions of people that are impacted by jails and prisons, and especially now like the immigration system, right?
I agree. W.E.B. Du Bois's The Souls of Black Folk, there's a quote in it. And I love this quote, I love this book. Released in 1903, you figure he was writing it the late 1800s. In it he says, but the chief problem in any community cursed with crime is not the punishment of the criminals, but in the preventing of the young from being trained to crime. Before mass incarceration was a thing, mass incarceration was a thing. When slavery was abolished, it was still allowed in the guise of if someone committed a crime. And so this new idea of prison being the new form of slavery, so to speak, it's a traumatic system. It's trauma to families, trauma to communities, trauma to the individual. And then it's this idea of returning and just catch up, figure it all out, but not being equipped.
Yeah.
And if the clinicians are not equipped to work with the population, then what are we doing when we think about our ethical standards as social workers?
Yeah. Tell me what your vision, if somebody doesn't, like, is new to the field, right? Tell us your vision for credible messengers.
My vision for credible clinicians,
Thank you.
as being credible messengers on steroids. What I mean by that is, my vision is to attract individuals who has a plethora of lived experience. In it, we have more agents who can engage populations who need healing. Credible clinicians is my initial push because this is my population. I'm formerly incarcerated. I'm from Brooklyn, Brownsville, East New York. My first language was Brooklynese. So I know my community. I know the pockets of populations that need this therapeutic work. But I can't be everywhere. So my vision is to attract clinicians who are interested, clinicians who have direct lived experience, help train them. I want to attract credible messengers who have the idea, I want to go back to school to get my master's and get licensed, and I want to do this work. I want to be able to attract them, help train them, help place them in different schools and different internships, provide the supervision, and create access to some dope clinicians that can help heal. Because trauma is universal.
Yeah.
It don't discriminate. So that's my vision.
Thank you. Can you share one project or initiative you're really proud of since graduating?
One project, I am next steps away from opening a group practice with another formerly incarcerated doctor, Dr. Stroud, and we have formed a Lived Experience Therapists, PLLC. We have an office that will soon be opening in Queens, where we will be providing individual, family, couples, group therapy, as well as supervision services and community trainings. This is one of the biggest things that I'm like super proud of right now.
How could people find out about that and find out about your work?
Follow me on IG, Dr. for Joe GI. I'm on LinkedIn, Dr. Joseph Williams. Check out my website, Lifechess Inc., LYFECHESSYNK.com, and shoot me an email, joewillLCSW@gmail.com. That's JOEWILLLCSW@gmail.com.
Thank you. What advice would you give? I mean, you're talking about this idea of credible clinicians, right? What advice would you give to formerly incarcerated people that are considering social work, people in social work that are considering doctorates? You know, like this is such a time, right? What advice would you give to them?
Don't be afraid of the loan. The student loan may be something that would deter us. It pays for itself, so that would be the first thing. Count the cost. What I mean by count the cost before you bill. Sit down with a calendar and look at what that timeline will look like. What are your resources? What is it that is encouraging you to want to do this work? Because when you figure out your why, no matter what storm you'll face, your why will be center focus and you'll keep pushing. Tap in with me. Another bit of advice, I'm available. Always say, if you've been up north, if you've been in the streets, you know somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody that could get to me, reach out to me. I'm accessible, I'm available. Let's connect and build. And that's why I did this. My doctorate wasn't for me, this was for us.
Thank you. Looking ahead, what vision guides your work and where do you hope to see the field of social work in the next decade?
Looking ahead, the thing that guides my work is healing. I like to consider myself to be a conduit of comfort, healing, and peace. I can't fix anybody and I can't heal anyone because I just don't have those powers. But I can help individuals obtain the tools to start the healing process. I can help individuals recognize their lens and help adjust the lens to be able to figure out what you need for your wins.
So, anything else you want to share? I know that it's such a journey, right? You've talked about this before. Like I don't know what percentage of the population has doctorates, but I'm sure it's so little. And when you add being formerly incarcerated to that, when you add being a black male to that, right, it's probably even less. So, I mean, how do you feel like now that you have a doctorate and you have this positionality to really do this work? Like, what does that mean for you?
I feel scared. was in prayer and realized that I have a fear to lead. I don't mind teaching, I don't mind talking, but leading, and I spend some of my trauma history, what has happened when I've been the leader. But this doctorate work, this social work, this is not even like a job, this is a passion. And in this passion, I see being a agent of healing, right? Come in contact with me, we're gonna have a discussion on how to go about starting the healing process. Because as I always say, and you can Google it, a wound, the healing process starts from the inside out. So our healing from our trauma, the healing from broken relationships, the healing from broken systems, it starts from the inside out. And so I just want to be an agent, a conduit of this comfort, healing, and peace.
Last question, right? Tell us a little bit about, before you go, tell us a little bit about what your healing journey has been, and what are some like tools and practices that you feel, because you know the level of trauma that you've experienced is obviously significant, and a lot of people from those spaces don't get here, right? So what were some of the things that you know really supported you? And maybe it's the DSW community, but then you know you had tools and practices before that, right? So what were some of those things that really allowed you to be here right now and to be Dr. Joe?
Some of the things that helped in my healing process and in this journey of becoming Dr. Joe today was, one, recognizing my positive resource team. Who was my wise figure? Who was my protective figure? Who was my nurturing figure? In that, I also had to know who were the brothers and sisters that I could tap into with to debrief, and that will hold space, right? The traumas I had to heal from were traumas of, you know, family dysfunction, losing my father, growing up to a teenage mom, and her and I reconciling her discipline tactics and how that tapped into anger and violence in the street, and us repairing our relationship. The person I got shot when I was 18, in 2021, just recently, we had a sit down, and I looked him in his eye and told him I forgive him. And you know, that took my team bringing to my attention my own faults and things of that nature, and what was needed for the healing to take place. And when it came to pursuing his doctorate, my cohort, the professors, but Jay holding space, like being able to go in the office and cry and getting those texts locked in, like holding me accountable, all of those were like key to helping me get to this, to that, cross that finish line. There were moments when I point blank said, I don't need this. I could do all the work that I'm doing with my LCSW. I don't need this doctorate. But it was recognizing that getting across the finish line was, one, it wasn't about me. It was about the sacrifices made before me. Two, it was about what this doctorate would allow me to do, not for me, but for the community and for the work. And lastly, when I think of the landscape of social work, I like to call it the new frontier. Because with the new frontier, there's some trailblazers that's coming, that's settling some new land, that's doing some new things. So yeah, in the words of the great Jack Nick Joker, wait till they get a load of me. Dr. Joe G.I. Peace.
Amen to that. Thank you. That was a great ending, bro.
I had to throw that in just in case. Yo, appreciate you. I would not be